Now the author rahimahullah is going to go on, after finishing the section on menstruation, he's going to go on to talk about an-nifas, which is called, we can translate it as postnatal bleeding. And so he starts off by saying when nifasu kal haidi fi man'ihi. The first step that Al-Akhdari rahimahullah mentions here is that in terms of what is prohibited to do in menstruation, he says that everything that is prohibited in postnatal bleeding everything that's prohibited in menses is prohibited in postnatal bleeding. That's why it says when nifasu. As for postnatal bleeding, it is kal haid, it is like menstruation fi man'ihi, in regards to what is prohibited. And then we mentioned in that menstruation that the maximum duration of menstruation is 15 days. Here in Nifas, he says wa aktharuhu sittuna yawman, that the most, at the highest duration of menstruation is 60 days. So anything before 60 days will all be considered menses. And then he mentions the mas'ala فَإِذَا إِنْقَطَعَ الدَّمُ قَبْلَهَا وَلَوْ فِي يَوْمِ الْوِلَادَةِ اغْتَسَلَتْ وَصَلَّتْ. Here he makes the point that we just mentioned that the maximum duration of postnatal bleeding is 60 days. But here Al-Akhdari is making a point that as soon as it stops, then she's to make a ghusl, even if the blood were to stop the day that she gets pregnant. The day that she gives birth. So, for example, a woman gives birth, and so she enters her postnatal bleeding because she's bleeding. And on the same day, the blood stops. If the blood stops, then she is requested or obligated to make a ghusl and pray that prayer. Then he says, فَإِذَا عَوَّدَهَا الدَّمُ فإن كان بينهما 15 يوما فأكثر كان الثاني حيدا وإلا دم إلى الأول وكان من تمام النفاس. Important issue. We mentioned this issue in menstruation. What is going to be the rule of a woman who sees blood during her nifas and then it stops and then it comes back again before 15 days? In nifas, for example, if a woman is bleeding, let's say, for example, after she gives birth, she's bleeding for 10 days, and then the blood stops. And then after a few days, the blood returns again. Just like menstruation, we want to know whether we have to see whether or not 15 days has gone past or not. Again, we want to look at whether or not 15 days has gone past or not. If 15 days has not gone past and the blood returns, then that blood that she sees for the second time is a continuation of her postnatal bleeding. But if the blood were to come back after 15 days, then we know that it's not part of her postnatal bleeding, and so it becomes her menstruation. So, for example, a woman bleeds for 10 days. A woman bleeds her nifas for 10 days, and then it stops, and then on the 17th day, the blood comes back. The blood that comes back now, we know that it's not nifas, so we know that it's menstruation. So she's going to start a new menstruation from that period of time because we know that it's not postnatal bleeding. So that's the meaning of what when he says فَإِذَا عَوَدَهَا الدَّمُ, if the blood were to return, فَإِنْ كَانَ بَيْنَهُمَا 15 يَوْمًا, if there was between the returning of the two bloods, meaning between the two bloods, meaning the first bleeding and the returning bleeding, 15 يوما, 15 days فأكثر or more, كان الثاني, then that blood that returns, which we call the second bleeding here, is حيدا. So the returning blood after 15 days, then we know that second blood that has come back is a menstruation and not postnatal bleeding. And then he says وَإِلَّا, which وَإِلَّا here means, so if it is less than 15 days, right? If the blood were to come back before 15 days, dumma ila al-awwali, then she's supposed to connect those days from the second bleeding to the first bleeding. وَكَانَ مِن تَمَامِ النِّفَاسِ, and that is considered, and those returning days are considered part of her nifas from the first bleeding.